The rain that changed everything, a storm, a stranger, a secret that could destroy her or save her forever. The rain fell like bullets on the cobblestones of Palermo. At 22, Mary thought she knew what danger looked like. She was wrong. When a man on a midnight black motorcycle offered her shelter from the storm, she didn't know his name. She didn't know his world. She didn't know that one ride would pull her into the heart of Sicily's most dangerous empire, and into the arms of the one man she should fear most. He ruled the shadows. She brought him light. And in a world where love is the deadliest weapon of all, some storms never pass. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because this story is just beginning and you won't want to miss what happens next. The rain came without warning. One moment, the Sicilian sky had been bruised with twilight, deep purples bleeding into burnt orange along the horizon, the kind of sunset that poets wrote about and painters tried desperately to capture on canvas. The next, the heavens cracked open with a sound like the world splitting apart, and water poured down in sheets so thick that Mary could barely see 3 feet ahead of her outstretched hand. She pressed herself against the rough stone wall of a shuttered bakery, her breath coming fast and shallow, creating small clouds of mist in the suddenly cold air. Her cotton dress, the pale yellow one she'd chosen so carefully that morning because it made her feel pretty and confident, now clung to her skin like a second layer, completely useless against the deluge. Her phone was dead, the battery drained hours ago from taking too many photos of the beautiful city. Her shoes, delicate strappy sandals that had seemed so appropriate for a summer wedding, were now ruined beyond repair, the leather already beginning to separate from the soles. And the narrow street she'd taken as a shortcut, a stupid, reckless decision, born from wandering too long and losing track of time, was now completely empty, dark, and utterly unfamiliar. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Mary had come to Palermo for a wedding. A distant cousin she barely knew, someone she'd met maybe twice in her entire life, marrying a man from a family she'd never met. Her mother had insisted, using that tone that left no room for argument. Family is everything, Mary. You must go. You must show respect. You represent us there. So she'd flown in from Rome alone because her mother was too ill to travel, smiled dutifully through the lengthy ceremony in a church that smelled of incense and centuries of prayers, danced with old uncles who smelled like expensive cigars and cheap wine, and then, like the idiot she apparently was, she'd wandered off alone after the reception ended, chasing the romantic notion of seeing the old city by moonlight, of discovering hidden corners and secret piazzas that tourists never found. Now the moon was gone, completely swallowed by storm clouds that seemed to have appeared from nowhere, and she was alone in a place she didn't know, in a city that felt suddenly hostile and dangerous in ways she couldn't quite articulate. A crack of thunder split the air so loud and close that Mary could feel it vibrate in her chest. She flinched violently, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She pulled her arms tighter around herself, trying desperately to will warmth back into her limbs, but it was useless. Her teeth chattered. Her hair hung in dark, wet ropes down her back, dripping steadily onto her already soaked shoulders. Water ran down her face, rain mixed with what might have been tears of frustration and fear, though she refused to acknowledge them. She needed to move, find a taxi, find a hotel, find someone, anyone who could help her, anything. But the street was completely deserted, not a single soul in sight, not even a stray cat seeking shelter. And then she heard it, the low, rumbling growl of an engine. It came from somewhere behind her, cutting through the roar of the rain like a predator's purr, deep, powerful, purposeful. Mary turned slowly, squinting through the downpour, and saw a single headlight piercing the darkness like a lighthouse beam. The sound grew louder, closer, until the shape of a motorcycle emerged from the mist, sleek, black, powerful, moving through the rain with almost supernatural ease. It slowed as it approached her, the engine dropping to a low rumble. Mary's pulse spiked, adrenaline flooding her system. Every instinct she possessed told her to run, to flee into the maze of streets, to hide. But where? She was lost. The streets were a labyrinth she didn't know how to navigate. She was soaked to the bone, freezing, and the bike was already stopping just a few feet away from where she stood trembling. The rider killed the engine. Silence fell, or as close to silence as the storm would allow. The rain drummed on ancient stone, on gleaming metal on her exposed skin. The man on the motorcycle didn't move at first. He just sat there completely still, one gloved hand resting casually on the handlebar, his face completely hidden beneath a matte black helmet that reflected nothing. Mary's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might actually break through her ribs. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed the helmet. The world seemed to still. Even the rain seemed to pause, though she knew that was impossible. He was beautiful. No, beautiful was too soft a word, too gentle, too inadequate. He was carved from something darker, something more primal and dangerous. Sharp jaw shadowed with dark stubble that suggested he hadn't shaved in days. High cheekbones that could have been sculpted by a master artist. A mouth that looked like it rarely smiled but would be devastating when it did. And eyes, God, his eyes, so dark they looked black even in the dim glow of the street lamp behind him. Eyes that locked onto hers with an intensity that made her forget for just a second that she was cold and wet and afraid. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes. And in that look, Mary felt something shift inside her chest. A pull, a magnetic recognition she couldn't name and didn't understand. "You're going to catch pneumonia," he said finally. His voice was low, rough, with the kind of accent that wrapped around Italian vowels like velvet draped over steel, beautiful and dangerous all at once. Mary blinked rapidly, water dripping from her lashes. I'm fine." A lie. They both knew it. She could see it in the slight arch of his eyebrow, the almost imperceptible tilt of his head. His gaze moved over her, not in the way men usually looked at her, not with that calculating hunger or crude appraisal that made her skin crawl, but with something else entirely. Concern, maybe, or calculation of a different kind. She couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty made her pulse race even faster. "Where are you trying to go?" he asked, his voice cutting through the sound of rain. The hotel, near Piazza Marina." Her voice sounded small, fragile, completely unlike her usual confident tone. She hated it. He was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Then he swung his leg off the bike and stood. He was tall, much taller than she'd expected from seeing him sitting down, and broad-shouldered beneath the black leather jacket that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body. Rainwater ran down his face in rivulets, but he didn't seem to notice or care, didn't even blink as it streamed into his eyes. "That's 2 kilometers from here," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "At least. You won't make it on foot, not in this storm, not dressed like that. I'll call a cab." "No cabs are coming out here, not tonight, not in this weather." He said it with absolute certainty, like he knew the city and its patterns intimately. Mary's stomach tightened with anxiety. She hated that he was right, hated the helplessness creeping up her spine like ice water, hated that she was completely dependent on the mercy of a stranger. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with those intense dark eyes, and she had the distinct impression he could see right through her, could read every thought crossing her mind. "I can take you." Her heart skipped a beat, then another. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed simply, no argument or persuasion in his tone. "You don't." Something in the way he said it made her skin prickle with awareness. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't a reassurance either. It was just the truth laid bare between them. "I could be anyone," he continued, his voice quieter now, almost thoughtful, like he was working through a problem. "I could be dangerous." Mary swallowed hard. "Are you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, before her rational mind could catch up with her mouth. His mouth curved, barely, not quite a smile. More like the ghost of one, a shadow of something that might have been amusement or respect. Yes, Mary should have run. Every rational cell in her body, every warning her mother had ever given her, every true crime documentary she'd ever watched, screamed at her to turn and bolt, to take her chances with the rain and the cold and the maze of unfamiliar streets. But she didn't. Her feet stayed planted on the wet cobblestones. Because beneath the fear, beneath the logic and reason, there was something else. Something she couldn't explain or rationalize or dismiss. She believed him when he said he was dangerous, but she also believed, God help her, that he wouldn't hurt her. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. He was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a rope pulling taut. Then he shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement of those broad shoulders. "Maybe I don't like seeing people suffer needlessly. Or maybe you're bored," she said, surprising herself with the edge in her voice. This time, his smile was real, faint, but real. It transformed his face completely, softening those hard edges just enough to make him seem human instead of carved from marble. Maybe. Mary bit her lip, her whole body shaking now from cold, from adrenaline, from fear, from something else she refused to name. She looked at the bike, sleek and dangerous and powerful, then back at him, at those dark, unreadable eyes that somehow made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. This was insane. Absolutely insane. But staying here, freezing and alone and lost, felt infinitely more dangerous than getting on that motorcycle with this beautiful, dangerous stranger. "Okay," she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. He didn't react, didn't grin or gloat or look surprised or satisfied. He just reached behind him with practiced ease and pulled out a second helmet. "Put this on." She took it with trembling fingers. It was still warm from his body heat, and something about that small detail made her chest tighten. She slid it over her wet hair, fumbling awkwardly with the strap under her chin, her cold fingers refusing to cooperate until she felt his hands there, gentle, efficient, completely impersonal, fastening it for her with quick, expert movements. His fingers brushed against the sensitive skin of her throat. A shock of heat raced through her entire body, so sudden and fierce and unexpected that she gasped audibly. He pulled back immediately, his jaw tightening, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Get on." Mary obeyed, swinging her leg over the seat behind him, her soaked dress riding up her thighs. The leather was slick with rain, and she had to grip his waist to keep from sliding off. Beneath the jacket, she could feel the hard lines of muscle, the steady rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of his body cutting through the cold. He didn't say anything, didn't tell her to hold on or warn her or offer any instructions, just started the engine. The bike roared to life beneath them, vibrating through her bones, powerful and alive. And then they were moving, fast, cutting through the rain like a blade through water, the world blurring into streaks of light and shadow. The wind tore at her soaked dress, but she didn't care anymore. She pressed herself closer to him, seeking warmth, seeking stability, seeking something she couldn't name, and he let her. His body was solid, unmovable, like an anchor in the storm. The city blurred around them. Narrow medieval streets gave way to wider avenues lined with shops and cafes. The storm raged on, relentless, but inside the cocoon of his body and the bike and the speed, Mary felt safe. It made absolutely no sense. But it was true. She didn't know how long they rode. Time seemed to lose all meaning, becoming fluid and strange. But eventually he slowed, turning onto a quieter street lined with elegant buildings, and then, there it was. Her hotel. The lights glowing warmly through the rain-streaked windows, like a beacon of civilization and safety. He stopped directly in front of the entrance and killed the engine. Silence again, deafening after the roar of the bike. Mary climbed off on shaky legs, her muscles protesting after gripping the bike so tightly. Her hands fumbled with the helmet strap, but this time he didn't help. He just watched her, his expression completely unreadable, those dark eyes tracking her every movement. She finally got it off and handed it back to him, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." He nodded once, a short, sharp movement. "Be more careful." "I will." She should have walked away then, should have turned around, gone inside, taken a hot shower, ordered room service, and forgotten this ever happened. But her feet wouldn't move, and he wasn't leaving either. He just sat there, rain running down his face in steady streams, his dark eyes locked on hers like he was memorizing every detail. "What's your name?" she asked, the question tumbling out before she could stop it. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. His jaw worked, like he was debating whether to tell her the truth or lie. Then, Liam. The name fit him, strong, simple, dangerous. "I'm Mary." "I know." Her breath hitched, her heart stuttered. "How?" But he was already putting his helmet back on, his movements quick and decisive. "Go inside, Mary." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, delivered in that low, rough voice that made something in her stomach tighten. And despite everything, despite her independence, despite her usual stubborn refusal to take orders from anyone, she obeyed. She turned and walked toward the hotel doors, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might actually crack her ribs. She glanced back once, unable to help herself. He was still there, a dark figure in the rain watching her, waiting until she was safe inside. And then, he was gone. The bike roared to life with a sound like thunder, and he disappeared into the rain and darkness like he'd never existed at all. Mary stood in the hotel lobby, dripping water onto the pristine marble floor, her whole body trembling with cold and adrenaline and something else entirely. She didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him except his name. But she knew, deep in her bones, in the marrow, in places she didn't understand, that this wasn't over. Mary didn't sleep. She lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across the white plaster as car headlights swept past the window, listening to the rain batter the glass in rhythmic waves. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Liam, the way he'd looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes, the way his hands had moved when he fastened her helmet, so careful, so controlled, so deliberate. The way his voice had wrapped around her name like he was tasting it, testing it on his tongue. I know. How did he know her name? She hadn't told him until the very end, after he'd already brought her safely back to the hotel. Had he heard it somewhere? At the wedding reception, maybe? But that didn't make any sense. The reception had been absolute chaos, hundreds of people she didn't know, all talking and laughing and drinking, music so loud she could barely hear herself think. How could he have possibly picked her out of that crowd, learned her name, followed her, unless he'd been watching her? Specifically, intentionally. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running to the front desk to demand extra security or calling the police to file a report. Instead, it sent a strange electric thrill racing down her spine, pooling somewhere low in her stomach. By the time dawn broke, pale and watery and reluctant through the storm clouds that still hung over the city, Mary had made a decision. She wasn't going back to Rome. Not yet. Not until she understood what had happened last night. Not until she saw him again. She needed to see him again. She showered, taking longer than necessary under the hot water, trying to wash away the confusion and fear and strange excitement coursing through her veins. She dressed carefully in dark jeans and a simple cream blouse, tied her still damp hair back in a loose knot, and applied just enough makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes from her sleepless night. By 8 o'clock, she was downstairs in the hotel restaurant. The place was nearly empty at this early hour. A few tourists nursing espresso and studying maps with bleary eyes. An elderly businessman reading a newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. A young couple speaking French in hushed, intimate tones. She ordered a cappuccino and a cornetto filled with apricot jam, but barely touched either. Her stomach was tied in knots, her appetite completely gone. "Excuse me," she said to the waiter when he came to clear her mostly full plate, his eyebrows rising slightly at how little she'd eaten. "Do you know anyone named Liam? He rides a black motorcycle?" The waiter froze, his hands stilling on the coffee cup he'd been reaching for. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp, suddenly wary, all professional courtesy disappearing from his expression. "Why do you ask?" "He helped me last night, during the storm. I wanted to thank him properly." The lie came easily, smoothly, but she could feel the truth beneath it, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The man set down the dishes with a soft clink that sounded too loud in the quiet restaurant. Several other diners glanced over briefly. "Signorina, if you're smart, you'll forget about him." "Why?" Mary kept her voice calm, curious, non-threatening. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, his eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. "Because Liam Salvatore is not the kind of man a girl like you should be thanking." Salvatore. The name hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She'd heard it before, whispered at the wedding, spoken with a complicated mix of reverence and fear and respect and terror. The Salvatores were one of the oldest families in Sicily, their roots going back centuries, powerful beyond measure, untouchable by law or convention. And if the rumors whispered in dark corners were true, deeply, irreversibly entrenched in the world that polite society pretended, didn't exist. The Mafia. Mary's pulse quickened, her heart hammering against her ribs. He's one of them. The waiter straightened quickly, his face carefully neutral now, professional mask sliding back into place. I didn't say anything, Signorina, and neither should you. Not if you want to leave this city safely. He walked away before she could ask anything else, disappearing into the kitchen with practiced speed. Mary sat back in her chair, her mind racing, thoughts tumbling over each other. Liam Salvatore, a Mafia boss. Possibly the most dangerous man in all of Sicily, if the whispers were to be believed. And she'd let him take her home on his motorcycle, had pressed her body against his, had felt safe in his arms. She should have been horrified, should have packed her bags immediately and fled back to Rome, back to her normal, safe, boring life. But instead, she felt that same inexplicable pull, stronger now, sharper, more insistent, tugging at something deep inside her chest. She had to see him again. But how? She couldn't just walk into Mafia headquarters and ask for him. She didn't even know where to begin looking. The answer came that afternoon, delivered in the form of a note slipped under her hotel room door. Mary found it when she returned from a restless, aimless walk through the rain-soaked streets, her mind too full of questions to sit still. A single piece of heavy, cream-colored paper, folded once with precise, sharp creases. No envelope, no name. She opened it with trembling fingers. Piazza San Domenico, 8 p.m. Come alone. No signature, but she didn't need one. She knew. Her heart slammed against her ribs, so hard it almost hurt. This was insane. Meeting a stranger, a dangerous stranger with ties to organized crime, in a public square at night. Alone. Everything about it screamed trap, screamed danger, screamed terrible idea. But she was going. She knew she was going before she'd even finished reading the note. Piazza San Domenico was breathtaking in the evening light. The Baroque church loomed over the square, its ornate facade glowing amber and gold in the glow of antique street lamps. A few people wandered through the space, couples holding hands and stealing kisses, an old woman in black feeding pigeons from a paper bag, a street musician playing haunting melodies on a violin. But it was quiet, peaceful, almost romantic. Mary arrived at exactly 10 minutes to 8, her nerves singing with anticipation and fear in equal measure. She wore a simple dress, dark blue, conservative, nothing flashy, and a coat she'd bought that afternoon from a small boutique near the hotel. Her hair was loose, drying in soft waves around her face that caught the lamplight. She waited, standing near the fountain in the center of the square, watching the water catch the light. 8 o'clock came, then 8:15, then 8:30. Doubt began to creep in, cold and unwelcome. Maybe this was a joke. Maybe she'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe she was losing her mind. Maybe... You came. She spun around so fast, she nearly lost her balance. Liam stood a few feet behind her, hands in the pockets of a dark wool coat that looked expensive and perfectly tailored. He looked different than he had in the rain, sharper, harder, more dangerous in the soft evening light. But those eyes were the same, dark, intense, unreadable and infinite all at once. You knew I would, she said, proud that her voice came out steady despite the way her heart was racing. I hoped. A pause. I wasn't certain. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them with measured steps, and she caught the scent of him, rain and leather and something darker, something that made her head spin and her knees weak. Why did you send for me? She asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes, even though it felt like staring into the sun. Because you were going to look for me anyway. He tilted his head slightly, studying her face like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Weren't you? She should have denied it, should have played it cool, indifferent, protected herself. But lying to him felt impossible, like he'd see right through it anyway. Yes. A faint smile touched his mouth, so brief she might have imagined it. Dangerous habit, Mary. So I've been told. They stood there, the space between them charged with something electric, something that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. The square around them seemed to fade into nothing, becoming background noise. There was only him, only those dark eyes locked on hers. Who are you? She whispered. Really? You already know. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. I know your name. I know what people say about you. But I don't know you. And you want to? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise maybe, or hope or fear. She couldn't tell. Yes. The word hung in the air between them, raw and honest and completely vulnerable. Liam was silent for a long moment, his jaw working like he was fighting some internal battle. Then he reached out, slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, feather-light, and she shivered despite the warmth of the evening. "You should be afraid of me," he said softly, his voice rough. "I know. But you're not." "No." "Why?" The question sounded genuine, like he truly didn't understand. She didn't have an answer, not one that made sense, not one she could articulate. So she just looked at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes, letting him read whatever he needed to see there. Whatever he saw made his jaw tighten, made his hand drop away from her face like her skin had burned him. He took a step back as if needing distance, needing space to think. "This is a mistake." "Then why did you bring me here?" "Because I'm selfish." His voice was rough now, almost angry, but she sensed the anger was directed at himself, not her. "Because I wanted to see you again, even though I shouldn't. Even though it puts you in danger just being near me, just being seen with me." "What kind of danger?" He laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound with no humor in it. "The kind you can't begin to imagine, Mary. The kind that doesn't forgive or forget. The kind that destroys everything it touches. I'm not afraid." "You should be." "Maybe." She took a step toward him, deliberately closing the distance he'd created, refusing to let him push her away. "But I'm not." For a moment, she thought he might walk away. Thought he might disappear again into the shadows, leaving her alone in the square with nothing but questions and an aching chest. But he didn't. He just stood there, his dark eyes locked on hers, a war raging visibly behind them. And then, he made a decision. She saw it happen, saw something shift in his expression. "Come with me," he said, his voice steady now. "Where?" "Somewhere we can talk. Somewhere safe. Somewhere private." She shouldn't have agreed. Shouldn't have followed him through the winding medieval streets, away from the lights and the people and the safety of witnesses, deeper into the quiet shadows of the old city where anything could happen. But she did, because whatever this was, whatever madness had gripped her, whatever force was pulling them together, she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not from him. Maybe not ever. He led her to a place she never would have found on her own in 1,000 years of searching. A small cafe tucked into a narrow alley so hidden it might as well have been invisible, camouflaged by shadows and time. No sign announcing its presence. No lights to draw attention. Just a weathered wooden door with peeling green paint and a single window covered by faded lace curtains that had probably been white once decades ago. Liam pushed the door open without knocking, without hesitation, and the warm scent of fresh coffee and burning wood and something baking spilled out into the cool night air like an embrace. Inside, the cafe was small, intimate, the kind of place that held secrets in its walls. A handful of mismatched tables scattered across worn tile floors that had seen centuries of footsteps. Shelves lined with bottles of wine and grappa and limoncello, dusty labels suggesting they'd been there for years. An old man behind a scarred wooden counter who looked up when they entered, his deeply weathered face breaking into a slow, genuine smile that created 1,000 wrinkles. "Liam," the man said, his voice like gravel tumbling in a steel drum. "It's been too long, ragazzo." "Nonno." Liam's voice softened, just a fraction, barely noticeable, but enough for Mary to catch it, to realize this was someone who mattered to him. He crossed to the counter with easy familiarity and clasped the old man's hand in both of his own. "How are you?" "Old, tired, still breathing, which is more than I can say for most of my friends." The man's sharp eyes flicked to Mary, open curiosity gleaming there, assessing her with the kind of look that missed nothing. "And who is this?" "A friend." The word, or was it a lie, hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Mary felt the weight of the old man's gaze, measuring her, judging her, deciding whether she was worthy of whatever this place represented. Then he nodded slowly, as if she'd passed some invisible test she hadn't known she was taking. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the tables with a gnarled hand. I'll bring you something to eat. You both look like you could use it. Liam guided her to a table in the corner, away from the few other patrons scattered throughout the small space. Old men playing cards, a couple speaking in hushed tones over wine. He pulled out a chair for her, a surprisingly courteous, old-fashioned gesture, and then sat across from her, his back to the wall. A deliberate choice, she realized, so he could see the door, so nothing could surprise him, always watching, always aware, always ready. This place, Mary said softly, glancing around at the worn wood and faded photographs on the walls. It's hidden. It's safe, Liam corrected, his voice quiet. There are places in this city where the rules don't apply the same way, where the world outside stays outside, where old loyalties matter more than money or power. And this is one of them? Yes. She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand this world he lived in, the shadows he moved through, the rules that governed his life. But before she could form the questions, the old man returned with a wooden tray. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, sharp cheese, olives glistening with oil, thin slices of prosciutto, 2 glasses of red wine the color of blood. Eat, he said simply, and then he disappeared again, vanishing into the back room like smoke. Mary picked at the bread, tearing off small pieces, her appetite completely non-existent despite not eating much all day. Liam poured the wine with precise movements, his hands steady and controlled. Everything about him was controlled, she realized. Every gesture, every word. Even the way he breathed seemed deliberate, measured. You said this puts me in danger, she said finally, unable to keep the questions locked inside any longer. Being near you. He took a slow sip of wine, his eyes never leaving hers over the rim of the glass. Yes. Why? Because I have enemies, Mary. Powerful ones, dangerous ones, and they don't hesitate to hurt the people I care about to get to me. The people I care about. Her heart stumbled over the words, tripping and racing. You don't even know me. I know enough. Like what? She challenged him with her eyes, with the tilt of her chin. He set down his glass with careful precision, his gaze intense and unwavering. I know you're 22. I know you came from Rome for a wedding you didn't want to attend. I know you're braver than you should be, and that you don't listen when people tell you to stay away from danger. I know you have a scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 7. I know you prefer cappuccino to espresso. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous. Mary's breath caught in her throat, her pulse thundering in her ears. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know things, he said quietly, something dark flickering in his eyes. Especially when someone interests me. Especially when someone makes me feel things I thought I'd buried a long time ago. And I interest you? Yes. The word was simple, final, absolute, and it sent heat racing through her veins like wildfire. Why? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam was silent for a long moment, his jaw working, muscles moving beneath his skin. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the scarred table, closing the space between them until she could see the flecks of gold hidden in his dark eyes. Because when I saw you standing in the rain, soaked and shivering and lost, you looked at me like I was human. Not a monster, not a ghost, not something to fear or use, just a man. His voice was rough, raw, stripped of all the careful control he usually maintained, and Mary felt something crack open inside her chest. And when I touched you, he continued, his eyes burning into hers, when I helped you with that helmet, when my fingers brushed your throat, I felt something I haven't felt in years, something I thought I'd lost forever, something I thought this life had killed inside me. What? She could barely form the word. He didn't answer directly. But the look in his eyes, vulnerable and fierce and desperate all at once, said everything his words couldn't. Mary's pulse thundered so loudly in her ears she could barely hear the quiet conversations around them, the soft music playing from somewhere in the back. She should have been afraid, should have run while she still could, but instead she reached across the table and placed her hand over his, her fingers trembling slightly. His skin was warm beneath hers, rough, scarred in places she couldn't see but could feel beneath her fingertips, a life written in marks and wounds. He went absolutely still, like he'd stopped breathing. I'm not afraid of you, Liam, she said softly, meaning every word. You should be. Maybe, But I'm not. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The cafe around them faded into nothing, becoming background noise, meaningless. There was only his hand beneath hers, the heat of his gaze, the electric charge humming in the air between them like a live wire. And then, slowly, carefully, like he was handling something infinitely precious and fragile, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise, like a vow. "If you stay," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "if you let this continue, there's no going back. Do you understand? Once you're in my world, you can't just walk away. It doesn't work that way." Mary's throat tightened, her chest aching. "Yes. And you still want this? Want to know me? Want to risk everything for something that might destroy you?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Liam closed his eyes briefly, as if warring with himself, as if fighting demons she couldn't see. Then he opened them again, and the decision was made, clear in his expression. "Then I'll protect you. No matter what it costs me, no matter what I have to do. I don't need protection. Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet. You don't understand this world, Mary. You don't understand what people like me are capable of, the good and the terrible." Before she could argue, before she could tell him she was stronger than he thought, the door to the cafe opened with a soft creak. A man stepped inside, young, maybe late 20s, lean and sharp-eyed, dressed in dark clothes. His eyes swept the room in one practiced motion and landed immediately on Liam with recognition and urgency. Liam released her hand and stood in one fluid, effortless motion. "Stay here." "Who?" "Stay here, Mary." His voice was steel wrapped in silk, a command, not a request. She obeyed, watching as he crossed to the man. They spoke in low, rapid Italian, too fast and quiet for her to catch the words even though she spoke the language. But she saw the tension in Liam's shoulders, the way his hand moved instinctively toward his side, toward a weapon she suddenly realized he must be carrying, hidden beneath his coat. Her stomach twisted with fear, not of him, but for him. The conversation ended abruptly. The man nodded once, sharp and military precise, and left, the door swinging shut behind him with barely a sound. Liam stood there for a moment, his back to her, his body taut with barely restrained violence like a predator ready to strike. Then he turned and crossed back to the table, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes dark with worry. "We need to go," he said, his voice clipped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about. Not yet. But we can't stay here." "Liam." "Mary." He took her hand, pulling her gently but firmly to her feet. "Trust me. Please." She looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen before. Not fear. He didn't seem capable of fear, but urgency, concern, a desperate need to keep her safe. "Okay," she whispered. He led her out of the cafe, back into the night. The streets were darker now, emptier, the few people who'd been out earlier having retreated to warmth and safety. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with moisture, clinging to her skin and clothes. They walked quickly, his hand tight around hers, until they reached his motorcycle parked in a shadowed alcove between two ancient buildings. "Get on," he said, handing her the helmet he'd pulled from the storage compartment. This time, she didn't hesitate. She climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist, pressing herself against his back, and he took off into the night, like they were being chased by ghosts. The city blurred past them in streaks of light and shadow. She didn't know where they were going, didn't care. She just held on to him, her cheek pressed against the leather of his jacket, feeling the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. And she knew, deep in her bones, in her soul, that her life had just changed forever, that there was no going back, that she didn't want to. They rode for what felt like hours, leaving the city lights behind and climbing into the hills that ringed Palermo like protective arms. The moon broke through the scattered clouds, casting silver light over the landscape. Endless olive groves and carefully tended vineyards and ancient stone walls that had stood for centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of empires. Finally, Liam slowed and turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt path barely wide enough for the motorcycle. The bike bumped over uneven ground, kicking up small clouds of dust, until they reached a tall iron gate set into a stone wall covered with ivy and climbing roses. He stopped, killed the engine with a twist of his wrist, and climbed off to open it, pulling a key from his pocket. Beyond the gate, revealed gradually as they moved forward, was a villa. It rose from the hillside like something out of a dream or a painting from centuries ago. Old stone, weathered to warm gold by time and sun, covered in places by ivy and brilliant purple bougainvillea. Terracotta roof tiles, tall windows with wooden shutters, lights glowing warmly from inside, welcoming and safe. The air smelled of jasmine and earth and something else, something green and alive. Mary climbed off the bike on shaky legs, removing the helmet with trembling hands. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe," Liam said, locking the gate carefully behind them before turning to face her. "My home. The only place I can guarantee your safety right now." She stopped walking abruptly, her heart skipping. "You brought me to your home." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his expression was almost vulnerable. "I told you. I'll protect you, and this is the safest place I know. The walls are high, the security is thorough. No one comes here without my permission." "From what? What happened back at the cafe? Who was that man?" "Someone saw us together. Word travels fast in my world, faster than you can imagine, and there are people who would be very, very interested to know that I've taken an interest in someone unconnected to this life, someone they could use." Taken an interest. Such careful, controlled words for something that felt so much bigger. "Is that what this is?" she asked softly, her voice barely carrying across the small distance between them. "You've taken an interest in me." Liam stepped closer, and suddenly the space between them felt charged, electric, alive with possibility. "What do you want it to be, Mary?" Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard it almost hurt. "I don't know." "Liar." The word was soft, almost tender, with no accusation in it. He reached out and cupped her face in both hands, his palms warm against her cheeks, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with impossible gentleness. His touch was so careful, so reverent, it made her ache in ways she didn't understand. "You know exactly what this is," he murmured, his voice rough and low. "You felt it the moment I stopped in the rain, the moment you got on my bike, the moment you looked at me like I was worth saving instead of running from." "Liam, say it, Mary. Be honest. Be brave." Her breath hitched. "I can't." "Why?" "Because it's insane. Because I don't even know you, not really. Because this could destroy everything. Because you're afraid." "Yes." He leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Good. Fear means you're smart. Fear means you understand what's at stake here." "And what is at stake?" she whispered. "Everything. Absolutely everything." The word hung between them, heavy and true and terrifying. Mary closed her eyes, breathing him in. Leather and rain and something darker, something dangerous and intoxicating that called to her in ways she couldn't explain or resist. "I should leave," she whispered, even as every cell in her body screamed at her to stay. "Yes." "Go back to the hotel, go back to Rome, forget this ever happened." "Yes, but I'm not going to." "No." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze stole the breath from her lungs, made her dizzy. "If you stay, Mary, if you walk through that door with me, I won't let you go. Do you understand? I can't, I won't. I'm not that strong." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. It's a warning. It's the truth." And then, before she could respond, before she could think, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative or careful or exploratory. It was fierce and desperate and utterly consuming, like he was drowning and she was air. His hands slid into her hair, tangling in the strands, holding her to him, and she gasped against his mouth, her fingers clutching desperately at his jacket. The world spun, or maybe she was falling. She didn't know, didn't care. All she knew was the heat of him, the taste of him. Wine and something darker, the way he kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, their hearts racing in sync. "Inside," he said roughly, his voice raw. "Now, before I lose what little control I have left." She nodded, unable to speak, unable to form words. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers with perfect, deliberate precision, and led her toward the villa. The interior was beautiful in a way that took her breath away all over again. High ceilings with dark, exposed wooden beams, stone floors covered in rich woven rugs in deep reds and golds. Furniture that was clearly old but impeccably cared for, each piece chosen with intention and meaning. Art on the walls, paintings and sketches and photographs that looked like they belonged in museums, not private homes. But Mary barely saw any of it. She only saw him. Liam closed the heavy wooden door behind them and locked it with deliberate care. Then he turned to her, and the look in his eyes, dark and hungry and desperate, made her knees weak, made her core tighten with anticipation. "Wine?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled, like he was holding himself back by sheer force of will. "I don't want wine." "What do you want?" "You." The word came out without hesitation, raw and honest. Liam closed his eyes briefly, his jaw clenching, like he was fighting for control. Then he crossed to her in 3 long strides and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, more thorough, his hands framing her face like she was something infinitely precious and fragile. Mary melted into him completely, her body fitting against his like they'd been made for this exact moment, for each other. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was ragged, uneven. "Bedroom. Upstairs. Unless you want me to take you right here against the wall." Heat flooded through her at his words. "Upstairs," she managed. He took her hand and led her up a wide stone staircase, his grip firm and sure. The bedroom was at the end of a long hallway, spacious and simple, with a massive bed covered in white linens and windows that overlooked the valley below, now silvered with moonlight. But Mary didn't look at the view. She only looked at him. Liam stopped in the center of the room, his hand still holding hers, his eyes searching her face. "Last chance, Mary. If you want to leave, I'll take you back to the hotel right now. No questions, no judgment, no anger. I'll let you go and we'll pretend this never happened." She stepped closer, deliberately closing the space between them, refusing to let him push her away. "I'm not leaving." He searched her eyes for a long, breathless moment. Then he nodded, something settling and resolving in his expression. "Then stay with me. For tonight. For as long as you'll have me." "Okay," she whispered. And she did. Mary woke to golden sunlight streaming through tall windows and the distant sound of birds singing somewhere in the garden below. For a brief, disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The rain, the ride, the kiss, the night, everything. And her heart stuttered and raced in her chest. She was in Liam's bed, alone. She sat up slowly, carefully, pulling the soft white sheet around herself. The room was quiet, peaceful, filled with warm morning light that made everything look softer, gentler. Through the window, she could see the valley spread out below, green and gold, and impossibly, heartbreakingly beautiful. A soft knock on the door made her jump slightly. "Come in," she called, her voice rough with sleep and emotion. The door opened quietly, and Liam stepped inside. He was fully dressed in dark jeans and a simple white linen shirt, his hair still slightly damp from a shower, droplets of water clinging to the dark strands. He carried a wooden tray, coffee, fresh bread, ripe fruit, cheese, honey. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice warm. Mary's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. He looked different, softer somehow, more open. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time, without all the protective walls he usually kept in place. "Morning," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He set the tray carefully on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain some distance between them. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years," she admitted honestly. A faint, genuine smile touched his mouth, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Good. I'm glad." They were silent for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling around them like morning mist. "Liam," Mary said softly, reaching out to touch his hand. "What happens now? After this? After last night?" He looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing slowly over her knuckles. "I don't know. This has never happened to me before." "What hasn't?" "Caring about someone who isn't part of this world. Wanting to protect someone more than I want power or control. Feeling like my heart might actually stop if something happened to you." Her breath caught. "Do you regret it? Last night?" "No." The word was immediate, fierce, absolute. "Never. Not for a single second." "Then what's wrong?" I can see it in your eyes." He looked up at her, and she saw the conflict there, the war between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "I told you last night. Being with me puts you in danger. Real serious danger. And now that we've—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening with emotion. "Now it's real," she finished for him, understanding dawning. "Yes, now people will know, will see, will use it against me, against us." Mary squeezed his hand tightly. "I'm not afraid, Liam. You should be. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then help me understand. Tell me. Explain your world to me instead of trying to protect me from it." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to come from deep in his soul. "My family, the Salvatores, we've controlled parts of this island for 300 years, longer than some countries have existed. We're not just criminals, Mary, we're a system, a government within the government. We settle disputes. We protect people the law won't protect. We provide for families who have nowhere else to turn." "And the illegal parts?" she asked quietly. "Yes, those too. I won't lie to you about what I am, what I do." His eyes were steady on hers, unflinching. "But I also won't apologize for surviving in a world that was chosen for me before I was born." She reached out and cupped his face, feeling the roughness of his morning stubble against her palm. "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to let me in, to let me choose this, choose you, with my eyes open. Mary, I'm 22, not 12. I can make my own decisions, and I'm choosing to stay, to understand, to be part of your life if you'll let me." Liam closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. "You're going to break my heart, aren't you?" "I hope not," she whispered. "I really hope not." He opened his eyes and pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. "Then stay. For today. Let me show you my world. The real parts, not just the dangerous ones." "Okay," she said against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "Show me." And for 3 perfect days, he did. Liam showed her his Sicily, not the tourist version with cathedrals and markets and guided tours, but the real one, the hidden one, the one that lived in shadows and secrets and fierce, ancient loyalties. He took her to the olive groves his family had tended for generations, showing her trees that were hundreds of years old, their trunks twisted and gnarled like old men. He explained how his great-great-grandfather had planted this section, how each tree had a story, a history. He drove her to the cliffs overlooking the sea where he used to escape as a boy, when the weight of his family name became too heavy to bear. They sat on sun-warmed rocks and watched waves crash against ancient stone, and he told her about the dreams he'd had before duty crushed them. He brought her to a small church in the hills where his grandmother was buried, the woman who had raised him when his parents died too young. He knelt at her grave and spoke to her in Italian, too soft for Mary to hear, but she saw his shoulders shake once, saw him wipe his eyes before he stood. "She would have liked you," he said quietly, taking Mary's hand. "She always said I needed someone who could see past the armor to the man underneath." "Was she right?" Mary asked. "I think maybe she was." At night, they returned to the villa. They cooked dinner together in the massive kitchen, him teaching her how to make proper pasta from scratch, her laughing when flour ended up everywhere except where it was supposed to be. They sat on the terrace under the stars, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories, about his childhood, wild and free before responsibility found him. About the moment he realized the family business wasn't just olive oil and wine and legitimate enterprises, but power and fear and blood. About the day he took over, when his father was killed by a rival family and the weight of the Salvatore name fell on his 19-year-old shoulders like a mountain. "I was too young," he said one night, staring out at the valley bathed in moonlight. "Too angry, too broken. But I didn't have a choice. Walk away, and everyone who depended on us would suffer. Stay, and lose any chance of a normal life." Mary leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in his scent. "Do you ever wish you could walk away? Just leave it all behind?" "Every single day," he admitted quietly. "Then why don't you?" "Because if I walk away, the people who depend on me suffer. My family, not just blood, but the families who have been loyal for generations, the ones who have nowhere else to turn, the widows and orphans we support, the businesses we protect from predators worse than us." He paused, his hand tightening around hers. "And because in this world you don't just walk away and retire to a beach somewhere, you disappear, permanently, and I won't let that happen." She understood then, truly understood. This wasn't just about power or money or control. It was about survival, about protecting the ones he loved, even when it cost him everything he wanted. And she was starting to realize, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that she was one of them now, one of the people he would protect, one of the people he loved. But on the fourth morning, everything changed. Mary was in the garden, sitting beneath the spreading branches of an ancient fig tree, reading a book she'd found in Liam's extensive library. The morning was perfect. Warm sun, cool breeze, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. Then she heard it, the sound of car engines approaching fast, multiple vehicles moving with purpose. She looked up to see 3 black SUVs coming up the long driveway, kicking up clouds of dust, moving far too fast to be friendly. Her stomach dropped, cold fear flooding through her veins. Liam appeared from the house almost instantly, his expression hard, all the softness of the past few days completely gone. "Inside now. What's happening?" "Mary, go inside. Lock yourself in the bedroom. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." The command in his voice left absolutely no room for argument. She stood quickly, the book falling forgotten to the ground, and hurried toward the villa. But she didn't go inside. She couldn't. Instead, she pressed herself against the stone wall near the entrance, hidden in the shadows, watching. The SUVs stopped in a dramatic cloud of dust and exhaust. Men climbed out, 6 of them, all dressed in expensive dark suits, all carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that came from knowing they were dangerous and untouchable. But it was the man who emerged from the lead vehicle that made Mary's blood run cold. He was older than Liam, maybe 50 or 55, with silver hair swept back from a face like carved granite, all sharp angles and hard lines. He walked with the kind of absolute authority that didn't need to be announced or explained. It simply was, undeniable, inevitable. "Liam," the man said, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard, smooth and cultured, and somehow threatening despite the pleasant tone. "We need to talk family business." "Luca," Liam's voice was ice, cold enough to freeze. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." Luca smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Since when do family need an invitation? Since when do blood relatives require permission to visit? Since you made it clear your loyalty is to yourself, not the family." Family. Mary's heart sank like a stone. This was Liam's uncle, his own blood. "What do you want?" Liam asked, his voice flat, emotionless. "I want to talk about your distraction." Luca's cold gaze flicked toward the villa, and Mary knew with absolute certainty that he was talking about her. That he knew she was there, even hidden in shadows. Liam stepped forward, his body blocking Luca's view, protective and territorial. "Careful, uncle. Choose your next words, very carefully." "Or what?" Luca's smile widened, showing teeth. "You'll threaten me? Your own uncle? The man who helped raise you after your father died?" "If I have to." "Yes." The air crackled with tension so thick Mary could barely breathe. The men behind Luca shifted subtly, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Her pulse roared in her ears, fear flooding her system. "She's made you weak," Luca said softly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. "Soft, vulnerable. And weakness gets people killed in our world, nephew. You know this. She's none of your concern. Everything you do is my concern. You're the head of this family, the Don, and bringing a stranger into your bed, into your home, into your heart, is reckless, dangerous. It gives our enemies exactly what they need to destroy you." Liam's jaw tightened, muscles jumping beneath his skin. "This conversation is over." "Not yet." Luca took a deliberate step closer. "Get rid of her, Liam. Send her back to Rome. Pay her off if you need to, but end this before it becomes a problem we can't solve cleanly." "Never." The word was final, absolute. A line drawn in sand. Luca's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then you leave me no choice but to protect this family from your weakness, by whatever means necessary. If you touch her, if you even think about touching her, I will kill you myself. Uncle or not, blood or not, I will end you." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Luca studied him for a long, tense moment. Then he turned and walked back to the SUV, his movements unhurried, confident. The other men followed like well-trained dogs. At the vehicle, he paused and looked back, his expression unreadable. You've chosen her over your family, over your blood, over everything we built. I hope she's worth it, nephew, because this decision will cost you everything. Then he was gone, the SUVs roaring back down the driveway, leaving only dust and the scent of exhaust and the weight of terrible promises. Liam stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white, his whole body vibrating with barely restrained violence. Then he turned and saw Mary standing by the door, tears streaming down her face. His expression shattered, all the hard control breaking apart. You shouldn't have seen that, he said quietly, crossing to her. Who was that, really? My uncle, Luca Salvatore, my father's brother, second in command of the family. He threatened me, threatened us. I know, and I won't let him hurt you. I swear it. Mary's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. Liam, what's going to happen? What will he do? He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, like he was trying to absorb her into his body, to protect her by making her part of him. Nothing. I won't let anything happen to you. I'll keep you safe. But even as he said it, even as he held her and whispered promises against her hair, she felt the lie beneath the words. Because in his world, promises couldn't always be kept. And love, no matter how fierce, couldn't always protect you from violence. That night, Liam made arrangements. Mary watched from the bedroom doorway as he paced the study, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to people she didn't know, making plans, building walls, preparing for war. When he finally hung up, his face was grim. What did you do? She asked quietly. He turned to look at her, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her heart. I've secured you a flight back to Rome. Tomorrow morning, early before Luca can make his move. Her blood turned to ice. No. Mary, I said no. I'm not leaving you. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders in his hands, his grip gentle but firm. You don't have a choice. Not anymore. Luca won't stop. He'll use you to get to me. He'll hurt you or worse, and I can't let that happen. Then let me help you fight him. There's no fighting him. Not without tearing the family apart, starting a war that will kill innocent people. So you're just going to send me away? Pretend this never happened? I'm going to keep you alive. His voice cracked, raw emotion bleeding through. Even if it destroys me, even if I never see you again, I need to know you're safe. Tears burned her eyes, blurring her vision. What if I don't want to be safe? What if I want to be with you? Then you're braver than you are smart. He pulled her against his chest, holding her like she might disappear. And I love you too much to let you throw your life away for me. Mary's breath caught. Her heart stopped. What did you say? He pulled back just enough to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. I love you, Mary. I've loved you since that night in the rain, maybe even before in some way I can't explain. And because I love you, I have to let you go. No. She shook her head violently. No, you don't get to say that and then push me away. You don't get to make this decision for me. I'm trying to save your life. I don't want you to save me. I want you to love me. I want you to fight for us instead of giving up. I am fighting. His voice rose, anguish cracking through the control. This is me fighting, sending you away, keeping you safe, sacrificing what I want more than anything. That's how I fight for you. It's not enough. Tears streamed down her face unchecked. I love you too, you idiot. I love you, and I'm not leaving you to face this alone. He went completely still. What did you say? I love you, she said again, stronger now, meeting his eyes. I don't care about the danger. I don't care about Luca or anyone else. I care about you, and I'm not leaving. I'm staying, and I'm fighting with you, and you can't stop me. For a long moment he just stared at her, his dark eyes searching hers like he was looking for a lie, for doubt, for any reason to push her away for her own good. He found none. Then he kissed her, fierce and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say, couldn't articulate, could only feel. And she kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring all her fear and love and determination into it. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. If you stay, he whispered, his voice rough, there's no going back. You'll be part of this world, part of this life. A target, always. I know. And you're sure? Absolutely certain. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. Then we fight. Together. Whatever comes. Together, she agreed. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. I'll keep you safe. I swear it, on my life. I know you will. Just like I'll keep you safe. He laughed softly, sadly. You can't protect me from what's coming, Mary. Watch me. The attack came 3 days later, at dawn. Mary woke to the sound of gunfire, sharp cracks that shattered the peaceful morning like breaking glass. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, adrenaline flooding her system. Beside her, Liam was already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced speed, grabbing a gun from the nightstand drawer she hadn't known existed. Stay here, he ordered, his voice hard, all softness gone. Lock the door, don't open it for anyone but me. Liam, stay. Here. He kissed her hard and fast. I love you. Remember that. Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. Mary pressed herself against the wall, her whole body shaking violently. Outside she could hear more gunfire, shouting in Italian, the sound of breaking glass, car engines, chaos. She didn't stay in the bedroom. She couldn't. Moving on instinct, she grabbed one of Liam's shirts from the chair and pulled it on over her nightgown. Then she crept to the door, opened it silently, and moved down the hallway, staying close to the wall. The sounds were coming from downstairs. She could hear Liam's voice, sharp and commanding, giving orders, and another voice, Luca's, responding with cold amusement. Elena's stomach twisted with fear and rage. She crept down the stairs, staying in the shadows, and peered around the corner into the main room. The scene was chaos. Furniture overturned, glass shattered across the marble floor, bullet holes in the walls, and in the center of it all, Liam and Luca, facing each other like gunslingers at high noon, both holding weapons. Behind Luca stood 4 armed men. Behind Liam stood 3, men she recognized from the past few days, loyal to him. It didn't have to be like this, Luca said, his voice calm, almost regretful. You could have listened, could have sent her away, could have chosen family over a stranger. She is my family now, Liam said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. More than you'll ever be. Luca's expression hardened. Then you'll die for her. And after you're gone, I'll kill her too, slowly. Make an example. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Luca's finger moved toward the trigger. Mary didn't think. She just moved. No! She screamed, running into the room, throwing herself between them. Liam's eyes went wide with horror and fury. Mary, get back! But it was too late. She stood there, arms spread, shielding Liam with her body. Luca stared at her, his finger frozen on the trigger, surprise flickering across his usually controlled expression. If you want to kill him, Mary said, her voice shaking but clear, you'll have to kill me first. Go ahead, pull the trigger. Murder an innocent woman in cold blood. See how the family respects you then. Silence fell, thick and terrible. Luca's eyes narrowed, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You'd die for him? Truly? Without hesitation, she said, meaning every word. Why? What is he to you? You've known him less than 2 weeks. He's everything, she said simply, and if you can't understand that, then you've never loved anyone in your entire life. Something flickered in Luca's expression, pain maybe, or memory, or regret. He looked at her for a long moment, then at Liam standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, trying to pull her back to safety even now. Then, slowly, Luca lowered his weapon. Interesting, he said softly. Liam grabbed Mary and pulled her behind him in one swift motion, his body shielding hers. Touch her, and I'll kill you, uncle or not. I swear to God. You'd kill family for her? Luca asked. Without hesitation, without regret. Luca was silent for a long, tense moment. The armed men on both sides remained frozen, waiting for orders. The room held its breath. Then Luca holstered his weapon with a decisive movement. You're a fool, Liam, he said, but there was something different in his voice now. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps understanding. But you're also my nephew, my brother's son, and family, real family, the kind worth dying for, is rare in our world. He turned and walked toward the door, his men following. At the threshold he paused and looked back. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The others won't accept her as easily as I just did. You'll have to fight for her. Prove she's worth the chaos she's brought into our world." "I will," Liam said. "Good." Luca's expression was unreadable. "Because if you can't protect her, I will. Not because I like her, but because anyone willing to die for my nephew deserves a chance to live." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing, the door closing with finality. The silence that followed was deafening. Liam turned to Mary, his face pale, his hands shaking as he gripped her shoulders. "Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you?" "No, I'm fine. Are you—" He pulled her into his arms with such force it knocked the air from her lungs, holding her so tight she thought her ribs might crack. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever put yourself in danger like that. I can't lose you." "I couldn't let him hurt you," she said against his chest, her own tears finally falling. "And I can't live if something happens to you." They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sun rose over the hills, and the danger, for now at least, passed. The weeks that followed were not easy. Luca was true to his word. He didn't attack again. But he also didn't fully accept Mary, didn't welcome her with open arms. The family was divided. Some saw her as Liam's weakness. Others saw her courage in the villa that morning and respected it. But Liam fought for her, every single day. He brought her to family meetings, insisted she be treated with respect. He made it clear that anyone who threatened her threatened him. He slowly, methodically, built a place for her in his world. And Mary learned. She learned the language of power and loyalty. She learned which families were allies and which were enemies. She learned how to move through Liam's world without being crushed by it. She also learned that love, real love, the kind worth fighting for, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. 1 month after that terrible morning, Liam took her back to the cliffs overlooking the sea, where he'd first told her about his dreams. They sat on the sun-warmed rocks, watching waves crash against ancient stone just like before. But everything was different now. "I have something for you," Liam said quietly. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, a simple band of gold, worn smooth with age, delicate and beautiful. "This was my grandmother's," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She gave it to my grandfather the day they ran away together. They were told it was impossible, that their love would destroy them, that they came from different worlds that could never mix." "What happened?" Mary asked, her heart in her throat. "They built a life anyway. Not an easy one, but a good one. A real one. They had 53 years together before she died. And every single day my grandfather said choosing her was the best decision he ever made." He took her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. "Marry me, Mary. Not because it's safe, it's not. Not because it makes sense, it doesn't. But because I can't imagine a single day of my life without you in it. Because you've changed everything. Because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Tears streamed down her face, blurring the beautiful ring, the beautiful man holding it. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Always yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, soft and slow and full of promises, full of future, full of hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, both smiling through tears, Mary looked out at the endless sea and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, belonging, home. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," he replied. "For the rest of my life, for whatever comes, together." "Together," she agreed. And as the sun climbed higher in the endless Sicilian sky, Mary knew the truth with absolute certainty. She'd come to Sicily in the rain, lost and alone and searching for something she couldn't name. And she'd found everything. She'd found danger and desire. She'd found a world she didn't know existed. She'd found strength she didn't know she possessed. But most importantly, she'd found love. Real, fierce, dangerous, beautiful love. The kind worth dying for. The kind worth living for. The kind that changed everything.
the cobblestone, a bruised purple sky. I was standing alone. Then a roar in the distance, a shadow of steel, a stranger, a ghost, something wicked and real. I didn't know the world he was hiding inside, but I stepped to the edge and I took the ride. He's carved from the marble, he's made of the night, a heart full of shadows, but I am his light. One look in his eyes and the warning was clear, but the danger is sweet when the ending is near. Oh, let the storm break, let the heavens fall inside of his silence. I found my all. Love is the weapon, the sharpest of blades, a fire that burns through the darkest of shades. Some storms are forever, some fires won't die. We're chasing the lightning across the dark sky. An empire of secrets, a throne made of glass. The world waits in terror for the thunder to pass. They speak of a crown that is heavy with blood, but we're planting roses in the middle of mud. I don't need the safety, I don't need the shore. I found what I've always been searching for. They say he's a monster, they say I'm a fool to break every heart and to break every rule, but I'm staying here where the danger is deep. A promise of blood is a promise I'll keep. I won't let go. I'll never let go. Oh, let the storm break, let the heavens fall inside of his silence. I found my all. Love is the weapon, the sharpest of blades, a fire that burns through the darkest of shades. Some storms are forever, some fires won't die. We're chasing the lightning across the dark sky. The rain changed everything, it led me to you, and the storm